It's tiny, but it's epic.
Epic!
In Tiny Epic Galaxies, your mission is simply to colonize more planets and build a bigger fleet than your opponent. Victory is based 100% on victory points, so let's talk about how to play. So the first thing you want to do when setting up the game is you want to give each player a colored galaxy mat. Now, it doesn't matter what color you choose. There's no special abilities associated with different mats. They're all the same. So you're going to choose your color, and then you're going to get the tokens that are the same color as your mat. So then each player is going to set up their boards with 2 ships on the center of their galaxy mat, and then 2 ships along the ship track in the numbered spaces that have a square around them. Then on the resource track, you're going to place your culture and energy tokens to keep track of your culture and energy levels. And then you'll keep track of your empire level using the empire token on the outside empire track. Once your board is set up, you're going to shuffle the planet cards. You're going to put the planet cards face down, and then you're going to draw as many cards as there are players plus 2. So we're setting up a 2-player game here, so we're going to draw 4 planet cards and put them face up next to the deck. Then we're also going to shuffle the secret mission cards, and we're going to give 2 of these cards to each player, and each player is going to select 1 of those mission cards to keep and tuck under their board. Finally, we have the control mat, or the activation bay, and 7 dice, and we'll make both of these available to all players. And once we have everything set up, we're ready to get started. Now that we've got everything set up, all that's left to do is to go back and forth, taking one turn after another until somebody reaches 21 victory points. When somebody reaches 21 or more victory points, we will finish the current round and then tally up our victory points to see who wins. So let's take a look at what a typical turn will look like. The first thing you'll do on your turn is you'll look at your empire card to see what level you're on. And obviously we start at level 1. So we look across to see how many dice we're going to roll. In this case, we're looking at the dice column. At level 1, we're going to be rolling 4 dice. So we're going to take 4 of the 7 dice, and we're going to roll them. Now the faces that show up when we roll our die are going to determine the types of actions we can take on our turn. And as we take our actions, we're going to be placing our dice in the activation bay. And once a die has been activated, it's locked in, and we can no longer use that die for the rest of our turn. So we can only use each die once. But at any point in our turn, we can re-roll as many of our inactive dice as we want. But we only get 1 free re-roll. Anytime we want to roll dice after that free re-roll, it's going to cost us 1 energy. So we would take our energy cube here and move it down 1 space on our energy track in order to pay that cost. Now, before we can get much further, we need to discuss what each of the actions on our dice can do. And there are 6 potential actions, as you might have guessed, because there are 6 sides to our dice. Now, these actions are summarized on the activation bay to give you kind of a reminder of the types of things you can do. The first dice at the top of the activation bay is this one right here. With this action, you can move a ship. So if you roll this die, place it in the activation bay, you can then move one of your active ships. Now remember, your active ships are the ones that are in the center of your galaxy here or on another planet. The ships that are along this column right here on the side of your card, those ships are not available to you yet. You will acquire those ships as you level up your empire. Once you get to level 3, you can grab your first extra ship, and once you get to level 5, you can grab your second one. So at the most, you're going to end up with 4 ships. So with the move a ship action, there are a few things we can do. We can move a ship to a planet. We can move a ship from one planet to another planet, or we can move a ship from a planet back to our home base. Now, when we move a ship to a planet, we have two options. One option is to simply put it on the planet and take the action at the bottom of that card. In this case, it would be acquiring 1 energy, which simply means we would move our energy cube up 1 space on the energy track. The other option is to place it on its side, place your ship on its side at the beginning of the orbit, where we see the same symbol that we see on the move a ship die. So we place it there, and this means that we intend to eventually colonize this planet. Now, first we have to travel along this path, and we'll talk about how to do that in a moment, but this is how we get started colonizing a planet. Now, at any point, you can move a ship. Even if you've started orbiting a planet, you can move that ship to a different planet or back to your home base if you decide you no longer want to colonize that planet, or if somebody colonizes it before you're able to. So let's talk about our second action on our activation bay, which is the advance economy. What that means is we can advance along one of these tracks on the available planets if we have a ship currently orbiting that type of planet. You'll notice that on these tracks, some of them have an economy icon on them. Some of them have this blue diplomacy icon on them. If you roll an advance economy dice, which would be the one with the bar chart on it, like so, then we could advance one of our ships that is on a planet that has an economy track. Otherwise, if we don't have a ship on an economy track, there's nothing we can do with this die. Similarly, the advanced diplomacy icon here allows us to move along one of these tracks that has the blue economy icon on it. Once we advance all the way to the end of a track, that planet becomes ours, and we then slide that planet underneath, if we can get it under there, underneath our game board, and we now have another action that we can take whenever we roll a utilize colony dice, which we'll talk about in a moment. So let's say that we have a couple of ships out here. We have one on our first planet here, and maybe we have one that's just visiting another planet. And let's say that we roll this fourth die here, which is acquire culture, which is this little column looking icon. So if we roll acquire culture and activate that die, what that does for us is it allows us to add culture to move up along the culture track if we have any ships on a planet that provide culture. Now, as it stands right now, we only have ships on planets that acquire energy, and we know that by the icon on the top right hand of these cards. If we had a ship over here on this planet with the culture icon, at that point we could acquire 1 culture. If we had 2 ships, maybe one in orbit and one on the planet, one visiting the planet, if we had 2 ships on that planet, then we could acquire 2 culture. So we would move our culture token up 2 spaces on the track. You'll notice that our home base also has an energy icon on it. So let's move down to our second to last icon here, which is the acquire energy. And it works just like the acquire culture icon. The difference is you will only acquire energy where you have ships that have that energy icon next to it. So if you're on a planet that has an energy icon, or if you have some ships on your home base, not counting these ships over here, only active ships. So in this case, we have 1 ship on our home base and 1 ship on this planet up here. Both of them supply energy. So if we roll this dice and activate it, we would actually get 2 energy, and we would move our energy cube up 2 spaces on the track, which means we now have 4 energy to spend. So that brings us to our very last possible die roll here, which is the utilize colony option. This action allows us to spend either energy or culture to upgrade our empire and move it up to the next spot. Now, the cost of upgrading is going to be the number on the next available spot on the empire track. So in order to move to spot 2, we have to pay 2 either culture or energy. We cannot split that up. We cannot pay 1 culture and 1 energy. We have to pay either 2 culture or 2 energy. So if we pay 2 culture here, we can then move up to the next spot on our empire track. Now at this point, if we were to move up to space 3, for example, we would actually at that point acquire the ship, and it would become one of our active ships. We would put it in the galaxy with our other active ships. Also, you'll notice that depending on where we are on our Empire track, we increase the number of die we roll at the beginning of every turn, and we increase the number of victory points that we have. So right now, if we were at level 3, we would have 2 victory points. Now, another way we acquire victory points is by colonizing planets. So if we colonize a planet, for example, that has 5 victory points in the bottom right-hand corner, and slide that under our deck here, we now have an additional 5 victory points in addition to whatever victory points are provided by our home base. So in this setup, we would have 7 victory points. Now keep in mind, our secret mission will also provide us some victory points if we meet those pre-qualifications, but we don't actually get those victory points until the very end of the game. So those remain a secret. Now, when somebody reaches 21 victory points, those 21 victory points do not count the victory points on the secret mission card. We're only counting the victory points on our cards and on our home base. Now, when we colonize a planet, let's say we just colonize this one here, we would immediately replace it with another planet, and whatever ships we had on that planet would go back to our home base. If our opponent had ships on that planet as well, those ships would go back to that opponent's home base. So let's say that we're at level 3, we have 3 ships, we have 5 dice that we can roll at the beginning of our turn, and let's walk through a sample turn. So here's our 5 dice, we're going to roll them, and we're going to see what we've got. So we ended up with 2 diplomacy dice, 3 ship dice. So we have a very limited number of things that we can do here. But we've got 3 ships here, so we could move all of them to a planet if we wanted to. But let's say that we really wanted to move up on our Empire track and we wanted to get up to level 6 as quickly as possible. Well, we could do that if we rolled a colony action, but we didn't roll any colony action. So remember, you get 1 free reroll every turn. So one thing we could do is just reroll the entire hand. So we re-roll everything and we still don't get any colony actions. So it's going to cost us 4 energy to upgrade our Empire to the next step, because the next step has a number 4 on it. And we only have 4 energy right now. So if we spend another energy to re-roll everything, then we're not going to have enough to upgrade it if we do roll what we want. So one thing we can do is we can take this die here, which provides us with energy, and we can activate that. So once we activate that, we will acquire energy from every energy source that has ships on it. Now, none of these planets have ships on it, but our home base provides energy, and we have 3 ships on it. So we will actually gain 3 energy for using that. Then we can spend one of those energy to re-roll the rest of our die and hope for a colony roll, which again we didn't get. So we could spend another energy here. And I'm going to keep this energy handy. We're going to keep that off to the side. I don't want to re-roll that one just in case we end up rolling too many times. So I'm going to roll again. And here we go. Now we got our colony action. So now we want to upgrade. So I'm going to activate that one. And then we need to pay 4. Remember, the cost of upgrading is going to be the cost of whatever the next space is there. We need to pay 4 of either energy or culture. We can't pay both. And so we're going to pay 4 energy, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that will allow us to upgrade. So on our next turn, we'll be able to roll 6 dice instead of just 5. Well, now that we've kind of depleted our energy, I want to get some of that back. So I'm going to use this other energy that we rolled to score 3 more. So we'll go 1, 2, 3, and we now have 4 energy instead of 1. Now these 2 don't really do us any good because we don't have any ships on the planets that have the diplomacy icon on them, so we can re-roll those again if we pay 1 energy. So we'll pay 1 energy and see what happens, and we end up with 2 culture, which also doesn't do us any good. Now another option that we have, which I haven't brought up yet, is you can turn in 2 dice to change the face value of a 3rd die. So let's say that we didn't use this energy, and so we'll just go back down to 1 here. We're just going back in time a little bit here. Let's say we didn't use this energy and we just can't seem to roll what we want. Let's say that we rolled 3 culture and we have no use for culture because we don't have any ships on any planets that provide culture. So one thing we can do is we can either try to pay to keep re-rolling, or we can use the converter on the activation bay. And the way that works is you put one die on each of the squares on the converter, and by doing that, it allows you to take this other die and change the face of it to whatever you want. Now you can only do this with a free die. You can't do it with a die that has already been used in the activation bay. So now if we wanted to, for example, get some more energy or maybe send a ship out, we could change the face of that die and then activate it. Then we could send one of our ships, let's say to one of these planets, to start orbiting it. So eventually we would colonize it. Now, one thing I hinted at before is that we do have, once we colonize a planet, we have other actions that we can take whenever we roll the utilize colony icon. So let's say that that was part of our initial roll to utilize a colony, and now we can, when we activate that dice, we can either upgrade our empire or we could use any other number of actions that we have available to us here. So this action says we can pay one culture to a player to utilize one of their colonized planets. And what that means is we can take one of the planets that another player has already colonized, and we can use that ability simply by paying one culture to that player. And the way we pay one culture to that player is we go down one culture, and our opponent would go up one culture. And so as you acquire more planets, as you colonize more planets, you will have more and more actions that you can take on your utilize colony icon. So the last thing I want to mention is the follow ability. The follow ability allows you, let's say that we have a few culture and a few energy. It allows you to follow your opponent's actions by spending one culture. So we saw how we could spend energy to re-roll our dice, but we can also spend culture on our opponent's turn to follow any actions that they're taking. So let's say that our opponent has rolled 4 dice, and they decided they want to utilize this colony action here. So they place their colony on the activation bay, and then they take that action, and we decide, hey, we want to take a colony action too. All we have to do is pay one culture whenever they're done with their turn, and then we can do the same thing. We can use one of our culture abilities down here at the bottom. So that's basically how the game is played. You would just move in clockwise order. And let me go ahead and say, when you're following your opponent's actions, if there are more than 2 players, if there are 3 or 4 players and multiple people want to follow, you would follow in clockwise order. Everybody who says they want to follow would declare that, and then you would take those actions in clockwise order, just in case there are any conflicts that would happen. But again, you would just go in a circle until somebody has 21 points. So you need to keep track of who the first player was, because the person to the right of the first player is going to end up being the last player. So if the first player is also the first player to get 21 victory points, everyone else will still have a chance to go. You will keep playing until the start of the first player's next turn. At that point, the game is over, and you would add up your victory points. And again, your victory points are composed of whatever victory point level you're at, depending on your empire level. So we have 3 here. I also have 5 victory points here, so that's 8 total victory points. And then if we met whatever prerequisites are on our secret mission card, then we would gain some potential victory points there as well. And at that point, whoever has the most victory points wins the game. Well, that wraps it up for Tiny Epic Galaxies. I hope you enjoyed this little walkthrough. There's also a great expansion for Tiny Epic Galaxies, and if you're interested in learning more about that, let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to do a video on that as well. But if you like this video, be sure to click like and subscribe, and thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.